Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of the Hospitality Interviews. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Ruby Sweeney from the Events Hub. Ruby, ever so nice to see you. Very warm welcome, and thanks very much for joining us. Ruby, we've known each other for, I think 2-3 years now since we first met. Bumped into each other as we used to in the old world. Remember that time when we used to meet face to face? I think it was Dalmahoy Hotel. I was speaking at one of the hashtag events, and you were in the audience. It was great to meet you then. I know you quite well, Ruby. Some of the audience may not have met you before or not be familiar with the Events Hub. So why not tell us a little bit about yourself, introduce yourself in the business.
Of course. Thank you, Barry, for the introduction. So I have been running the Events Hub for over 9 years, and my experience has been live events and conferences. And in the past year, we have gone down the route, as many businesses in the events industry have done, and that is to offer virtual and hybrid event solutions for our clients, for existing ones, and also for the new ones that we have scooped up along the way as we embrace the world of virtual and digital and online and hybrid events, whatever the terminology is. We are doing it. So we help our clients to produce, plan, and promote their virtual events using all the expertise that we have from the events industry. My team come from conferencing, from venues, from the arts. So we have lots and lots of diverse experience, and that coupled together with a tech partner who help us deliver our virtual events now makes that a perfect relationship. And we are raring to go, and we are picking up clients every week and helping them to run and plan fantastic virtual events.
That's great. Thanks for that, Ruby. I mean, you and I have spoken together on a couple of stages, virtual stages, I should say, where we've combined your skill and expertise as an events planner, events organizer, and obviously me coming from the other side of the fence as someone who used to run events venues. And particularly over the last 12, 15 months, it's been an interesting and a very an in-demand combination, let's say, looking at both sides of the events agenda. Now, I mean, it goes without saying, hospitality industry has been one of the worst hit in terms of the impact of COVID and coronavirus. And within the hospitality industry, the event segment has been the worst hit of all of those. And, you know, it's no underestimation to say our friends and colleagues who are running physical venues have not been able to conduct business for over a year now. I can recall, well, we're recording this on the 1st of March. I can recall we were in January and early February when events were starting to be cancelled and postponed last year, simply because people didn't want to travel and didn't feel comfortable meeting in large venues. Without sounding trite, we keep in touch regularly, and I would say your experience of COVID or the COVID lockdown period has been a bit of a success story, because you've had the opportunity to, first of all, continue trading, but B, to adapt and adjust to the digital world that we're in. What's been your experience as an event organizer? What's been the highs and lows for you in terms of that adjustment, and then being able to facilitate events, but in a very different way from the way you used to?
For me, Barry, I would say my focus, when we go back very briefly, I'm going to do this very briefly, and take it back to April 2020. And I had come back from running my last large face-to-face conference for 160, 170 people that had traveled from around the world, 2-day event in London. I'm absolutely surprised that event actually took place. We all came back, it was all a bit surreal. And then everything started to shut down, and events started postponing, cancelling, rescheduling. It was chaotic. It was difficult. And I think we were in a place, and I'm talking sort of April, where I'd come back from that event, and I was just taking some time off, quite honestly, and also just letting that chaos sort of kind of go on around me, but not try to be too consumed by it. And central to my beliefs was that service piece, was how can I continue to be of service to my clients? And I know that as small business owners, we are the beating heart of our businesses. Yeah. But at the same time, we don't forget about those clients, and we think about that relationship. And for me, I had no, honestly, hold my hands up, Barry. I had no plan. I had no vision. All it was about service. How will I continue to serve my clients? And it wasn't a question that occurred to me as such. It was when I was on an online platform demonstration, and it was some event software that we've had for about 5-6 years. They had created this extension of their offering, and there was this virtual platform. And in that moment, Barry, I thought, virtual platforms, that's interesting. If I went down this route temporarily at the time, because who knew that this was going to go on so long? If I go down this route, I can still serve my clients. And that essentially was the bottom line. It was nothing else. There was no other plan, no other thought. And that was it. So I thought, right, okay, let me look into this some more. So it was difficult. It was challenging because I was at sort of this crossroads thinking, do I have to learn to become a techie? Do I, it was just all these kind of thoughts were coming through my head. And I have a team of subcontractors, and they were all busy with their families because suddenly kids were at home, and the same for me at this end. And it was all just a bit sort of all these mad thoughts racing through my head, thinking, what do I need to become? And I think that must have been a fundamental question for a lot of people, that do I need to change who I am, or at least what I do, to be able to survive? And I thought, I don't want to change. I don't want to learn something completely different. I want to use what I have. I want to use those skills and that expertise to continue doing what I've done to this point. And so as the months went on, and as I started discovering these virtual platforms, and then finding that, there are so many out there that are already in existence, or there are all these new ones popping up. And actually now I hear about several that pop up every week. And it is about kind of getting to a point where you go, okay, I'm going to invest either, whether it's time or money or effort, in understanding how this works really, really well, and kind of stick to that, and then also have other options. So it's great to get to that point now. But last year was very, very challenging. There was lots to think about. There was, do I invest, lots of money in this one platform, or do I keep an open mind and try and use different technologies and different ways of delivering events of different types? And I would use the analogy, Barry, that it's like putting all your money into one venue and going, every single event that I run is going to take place in this one venue, regardless of if it's a conference, if it's team building, if it's a summit, if it's a hospitality event. You're kind of putting everything into one venue, which it doesn't always fit. So
yeah, you just wouldn't do that in the old world. You
wouldn't, no, absolutely. But people have invested in platforms, whether that's clients themselves or the event management company. I use a different model so that I can use different platforms. But there was all this going on. So trying to understand the platforms, how they're priced, do I invest? And that's just one small part of it. And then there are other aspects like the technical production. So how does this work? What is live streaming? What is, all this other stuff that I didn't really understand or have much visibility of in the old world when I ran live events. So it was a huge year of learning. And it was difficult because our first few events, we had no idea of the amount of time and admin and stress that was going to come into them, not because of a lack of understanding what we were offering, but a lack of understanding processes. So again, we had to go through those painful moments of underpricing projects to be able to understand, actually, this is why we need to have a baseline of X for this style of event, because it takes this level of work to get it to that point. And so there was a lot of that. And then there was also a point around probably late summer, early autumn, I think, where we had so many inquiries coming through, but nobody was making any decisions because people were thinking things were going to open up in the autumn. So there was all this work that, again, you're putting proposals together and it's unpaid and all the rest of it. And then people were just too, I guess they weren't feeling bold enough to take a decision to make that commitment. And so they'd go back to Zoom, or they'd say, actually, we're just going to wait a bit longer, or we're just going to wait and see what happens, or we know someone who, and that was the end of that. So there has been a real kind of up and down and lots of highs and lows of personal learning, personal growth, personal challenges, as well as from the business owner of a small business, all the things financial and otherwise that I've been through. But I feel now in March 2021, I have an understanding of who I want to be as the leader of this business. but also who I want to be in my network and what I want to be known for. And that clarity is has been great, but it's all that hard work that happened last year that nobody has visibility of.
Yep.
That has given me the platform that I have now.
Absolutely. I think looking at my own network of connections, broadly speaking, I could put people into two categories. There were those who used the time last year very cleverly. As you said, there was an awful lot of background work going on to put things into place, to learn the tech, to adjust your business and your teams, to be able to deliver ultimately what your clients were looking for. And then there were those, especially at the operational side of events and venues and hospitality, who the phrase I've used throughout the last month, just broadsided. I was speaking to people who just didn't know where to turn because they'd never encountered anything like this. In my working life, never been in a period where you couldn't trade because of external factors which were completely out of your control. I'm used to running a venue and running hotels and such, where something happens, it threatens your ability to operate. You can react, you can do something about it. You can get a roofer or a plumber or electrician or whoever to fix it.
Yeah.
And of course, the scenario last year was completely different. So it's really interesting. Those who, I have to say, I'm now seeing flourishing, who've used that time very valuably last year, and those who are still there going, right, what's going to happen, what's going to change. And in many cases, the people who are in that situation through absolutely no fault of their own. I have to say, I am so glad I'm not at the sharp end of running a venue right now. It's 4 years since I stepped away from it, and I'm so glad I'm not in the scenario of running a venue at the very sharp end right now. There was a few things you said in that introduction that I'd like to expand upon in this interview, because it's really, really fascinating there. And I'm kind of not going to take them in any particular order, Ruby, but one of the things you mentioned that really resonated with me, even in the period in the middle of last year, when you couldn't really function with anything, you were still strategizing and planning and trying to work through the chaos, yet there was still a volume of inquiries coming in from your clients that, they were in the position of, would normally be planning our AGM or our convention or our reunion or whatever it might be. Okay, how can we do it? But you said there was a paralysis, that people weren't, they were talking about it, they were thinking about it, but they weren't confirming. Is that still the case? Has that changed?
It's a mixture. Again, I would put that in two camps as well. So firstly, that volume of new inquiries, it was predominantly new prospects, new business. Oh. Very few of those were existing clients, because I think when a client is existing, they know what you're capable of. They know that the way I like to work with them is almost kind of almost a coaching role as well, because we're building up their confidence and going, you've got this, we can do this as a team. We've got all of this in place. We have this process, we have this staff, we have all of these things coming together. There is absolutely no way this isn't going to be successful and meet your objectives. So the existing clients have the faith, because they kind of know where it's at, whereas the new prospects were tinkering. They were going, well, and I think and a big part, Barry, we may come to this later, and if we don't have time for this today, I'm sure it will form another conversation, but a big part is budgets, because when people look at their event budget, they're used to paying 25-30 pounds per head delegate rate or something at a venue or a hotel, and when you put the cost of a virtual event in front of them, absolutely, firstly, you're looking at probably a much higher per head cost, because there is a lot that goes into a virtual event, and people think, oh well, you don't see that, so why is there a cost? And you're not feeding, and you're not housing, and you're not and it goes on. You're not doing a drinks at the bar or a big fancy meal or something, but actually there's a lot more that comes into a virtual event that a lot doesn't get seen, but it adds to that production value and the slick finish of a virtual event that you do see. And so one was kind of getting people to that point to understand why the event is in that process, why the costings are what they are. But the other thing was also to make them understand that actually, when you look at budgeting for a virtual event, you're not just using an event budget, you're using marketing budget, because what a virtual event does is it gives you longevity and all these things that allow you to have a bigger marketing campaign, a far-reaching marketing campaign, a longer shelf life of an event, which then you can repurpose and monetize and all the rest of it. So I think from a financial and budgetary aspect, there's a lot more that needs to be done to coach people into the part with more cash, please, because this is going to give you this added value. And I think that's still a bit untapped, because there is that mentality of, I'm not erecting a marquee, I'm not feeding people, so why is it so expensive? So there's that, but again, it's not expensive, it's the value that you get from that virtual event and from repurposing the whole event or segments of, or marketing, social media, etc. So there's that aspect as well. And then I guess from the other side of it, what I'm looking at is that when people come to you with an inquiry, they're on the fence. They're not, and most of the people that came to me, maybe because of timing last year, were on the fence. And then I put something in front of them and say, this is how it would work. But because there wasn't very much evidence of virtual events being successful at that time of year last year, people went, oh, no, I'm not making that commitment. I'll just go and do it in Zoom, or I'll just wait. And there was, as you say, that paralysis, because there wasn't evidence of those events doing well or achieving all these things and ticking all these boxes. But what I'm finding now, and I've got a couple of clients, existing clients who've worked with for many years, and new clients, and a big part of them committing to what they've committed to is mindset. And a big part of last year for me personally was also mindset, and I've been doing a lot of reading around mindset and personal development and all these sorts of things. And it is about, and I think this is why also my business had that turnaround, was I wanted to keep going. I did not want to let my business die. And it was that kind of, that mindset that I'm going to push through this and I'm going to look ahead. Whereas a lot of my industry colleagues who run events were, head in the sand or head in the clouds, thinking either I'll just wait for it to blow over, or I'll be able to bounce back and we'll be able to run a live event in October with couple hundred people under one roof, and so there was kind of this polar position. I think a lot of people were in.
I think there was an awful lot of that paralysis through last year, and a lot of the people that I was meeting and talking with through my networking activities and through my own work were in exactly that scenario. And you mentioned you finished your last event in April last year, and then you thought, well, what next? Where do we go now? And there's a couple of things that are really relevant to that for me. I don't think any of us really saw this coming. We started to hear about coronavirus and people being unwell in the Far East and such. I don't think any of us really realized. And, I have very, very clear memories of the last event that I was at, which was about a week before the lockdown. We were told to lock down and not leave home. Monday, Aston Villa Football Club in Birmingham, about 140, 150 people at an event that I was attending. And we weren't really taking it all that seriously, if I'm being honest. We were all kind of elbow nudging and fist pumping and the rest of it, but we were still shaking hands with some people and we were crowding at lunchtime. We weren't really taking it all that seriously. So anyone that says to me, oh, they predicted this and they saw it coming, no, sorry, I don't buy into that. None of us did. And certainly none of us thought we would be sitting here a year later still in lockdown, and if anything, in a stronger and a more severe lockdown than we were in April, May last year. At least I think we can see the light at the end of the tunnel now. Whereas, last year, I think we were all guilty of thinking this will blow over in a few weeks' time. And look at it, 12 months later, we're still, arguably you could say we're in a worse position now than we were. In some respects, we're in a worse position than we were a year ago. I want to come back to pricing, because you mentioned that there, and I'm really glad that you did, actually, because my experience from being someone that used to coordinate and run networking events, it was a fascinating experience going from the old world face-to-face networking to virtually online. And one of the biggest challenges that I faced was exactly what you described there. There was an assumption of, why are you charging for this? it's free to use Zoom. Well, if you're still using the free version of Zoom now after a year, you've probably learned the lessons of why people would be charging for it. Now, when we were planning this interview, you said a fascinating thing to me, because we got talking about costs and investment and pricing of events, and you confirmed something that I suspected when you said to me, it actually costs more to stage a digital event than it did in the face-to-face world. And I just want to let that sink in for people who are watching this, because I suspect there is still very much the within the public, and understandably, there is the misconception that to do a virtual meeting is really cheap. It doesn't cost. Could you maybe just give us an idea of why there is a financial investment into running a virtual event?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, initially, if we think about the work and the training and the investments that people like myself have had to make in the past year to be able to turn our businesses around to become virtual and hybrid event specialists, so to speak. So I've had training myself. I've had one of my team train. We've invested in a few platforms or technologies. We've had to redo our marketing. We've had to change our websites and have videos produced and all the rest of it. So that we take on board as investments that we've made to change our businesses around. But at the same time, we've been learning. We've still been running events. So year on year, that expertise that we've built up, at the end of the day, you're not charging for your time, you're charging for your expertise, and you're charging for the value that you bring. So when it comes to a virtual event, what I do, Barry, is I break it down for my clients, for my prospects, into 3 key areas. So firstly, you have your event manager, who has essentially got that events expertise, that understanding of how a virtual or a hybrid event works. And they will oversee the project, they will break things down for you, they'll make things understandable, and then they help to move the project along. So your first sort of pillar, I would say, is that event manager. And then the second part is the virtual platform. So again, as you said, that could be Zoom, that could be a pricey event platform that comes with production and all the rest of it, and all these features that allow people to network and connect within that platform. So those platforms come with fees, whether that's a license, whether that's per user, but they come at a cost. And then when you are looking at a slightly bigger or more slick event, there is a cost for technical production. So that's time, that's bandwidth, that's equipment, that's people. And that's the third pillar. That production piece is essential when you're running a virtual conference or an AGM. So, for example, we used our production partner last week for a 2-day conference. And we had people from Australia, China, the States, Europe, Africa, all coming into our event. And now how could someone like me sat at home bring all those threads of a virtual event together without any of that equipment, without any of that production, without the graphics, without all the, everything that makes that event a slick, well-produced event that is well received on the other end? It's got to be an investment. So yes, virtual events can cost more, or can cost on par what you would pay for a live event. But the trouble with a virtual event, I wouldn't say the trouble, but the challenge is that there is a lot that we have to preempt. We have to go into every single detail, and we cannot leave any stone unturned, because, for example, if you go to a live event, we just rock up at the venue, we'll sort it out when we get there. You can't do that in the virtual. You've got to preempt that. So there is a very big difference. And if an event has been run as a live event previously, there is that historic sort of people looking back going, oh, when we have this as a live event, ... And there's that comparison. So there's a lot of that going on as well, which is why companies, organizations can be and are being reluctant about investing in a virtual event. But on the flip side, the positive of that is that you have got to really think about the strategy behind your events, your conferences, your meetings, your gatherings, and why you run them. Where's the value in them? And not just for yourself as a host or an organizer, but more importantly, for the other person on the other side of that screen. So whether that's your delegate, your sponsor, and sponsors and speakers are incredibly valuable in the virtual sense, because essentially they are either paying for the event or they're attracting people to that event. So their journey has got to be planned out and mapped out, and you work from that and you diarize their journey and build that into the project plan. So there's a heck of a lot to think about, and there's a lot more to think about than when you compare it to a live event.